Yeah, she said that herself, doesn't it? Is a version of it.
Yeah.
Getting away from it all, getting out of the rat race, hopping off the treadmill. We have heard about mindfulness in the classroom. Quite common in New Zealand schools as well, a version of it. And we just thought we'd touch on 3 aspects of getting away from it all, or leaving the, fast lane, stress lane. Reported in the Atlantic Monthly, a research team in Chicago spent a year studying whether students taught to be in touch with their emotions do better academically. This is kids, it's not varsity students. When the answer seems to be yes. When they take a break from lessons to do breathing exercises or watch nature videos or whatever, they become better overall students. Don't have time for all the details, but are you in favour of this? You got any worries about it?
And look, I won't go into details because it is someone that I work with here in Christchurch, but there was a school here and they introduced this very thing about a year ago in the younger years, the 7 and 8s. And I actually watched it. I went in and had a look at what they were doing, and they start with, and in fact my 17-year-old has done it through high school too, gratitudes, where they actually are thankful for things that a lot of us take for granted. And the school that I work with is an independent school, so there are things that these girls were communicating it just showed that they were appreciating stuff like their friends, the weather. And I don't know, maybe kids in Christchurch are appreciative of different things to what kids in other cities are after what we've been through down here. But I looked at some of the information, the research information on this. There was a study in Sweden, I think it was, and it helps girls particularly. I don't know why that is, but mindfulness definitely does seem to have a positive effect on learning and personal development too.
I think some of the uneasiness about mindfulness in the corporate world is to do with employers wanting you to work a lot harder and encouraging you to do relaxation so you can be a better worker. Yeah. But this doesn't apply to school.
But I mean, if it's helpful for adults, why wouldn't it be helpful for children?
Yeah.
Of course it would be. But what I see in schools is this huge focus on the national standards with little time for anything else, really. So,
South Korea is the most wired country in the world, they reckon. It now holds a space out competition, promoting a life free from stress and information overload, and 60 contestants spent 90 minutes in Seoul without talking, sleeping, eating, or using electronic devices.
90 minutes?
You might not pay $49.95 to watch that on pay-per-view, might you?
Yeah, that's bizarre. That's weird. A woman said something to me the other day, actually, because I've not had breathing problems, but I've been a bit short of breath, and there's no reason why I should be. And she said to me, do you get stressed? I said, yes, I do. She said, I think you're hyperventilating. And she said, start listening and thinking about your breathing. And do you two ever do that? Do you just take your breathing for granted, or do you actually stop sometimes and listen to yourselves breathe or control your breathing?
I've done a tiny bit of mindfulness, so at a pretty basic level.
Right.
So I try and, although it's invariably fail,
do you do it, Dita?
think about the breaths in and out.
I haven't done mindfulness as such, but I know that there was a theory about asthma that you could control your breathing through controlling hyperventilating. And it was a theory that was very popular, and some people actually managed to get rid of their inhalers from doing that. I mean, I couldn't and wouldn't, but I do think there's something to it, and it has those elements of mindfulness as well.
Well, we just take it for granted, don't we? We just breathe every day. We just breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Someone thought I was serious saying learnings before. It was meant to be ironic. Before we go, we've talked about poverty today and the struggles of the middle class. According to the Boston Globe, a distinguishing characteristic of the truly rich now is home elevators.
Oh, my God.
Would you like a lift in your house? Apparently they're in New Zealand now. You can pay up to $60,000 for low-rise, and that doesn't count, smashing out the middle of your house.
I think if people are going to have invalids live with them and whatnot, it's not a bad idea. But otherwise,
future-proof, live there for a long time and make sure that they can get up and down. But
otherwise, take the stairs. Might be a cheaper option.
You wouldn't feel lovely just rising gently in the elevator?
No.
I would be thinking about the money I'm spending on it.
Ali Jones, thank you very much for being on the panel today.
Thank you.
Always a great pleasure. And you too, Dita. Thank you for coming in. Dita DeBoni as well. And Checkpoint on the way now with John Campbell.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell. On behalf of the Checkpoint team, thank you for joining us. Tonight, the latest from Waikaia Bush Road, the four-wheel drive convoy trapped in snow overnight. Are they out? And if so, how? And if not, when will they be? We cross live to our reporter. And what about the road itself? Road being a very generous term. Was it a sensible place to be this time of year? Also tonight, deja vu all over again. To quote old Yogi Berra, the rain comes and so does flooding in parts of Dunedin. We go back to one of the homeless families we met last week as she goes back to WINS for more emergency housing funding. She has to borrow the money. And in doing so, we hear a story of incredible emergency housing debt. We go to Australia as their election campaign begins to define genuine differences in policy and style. And Steve Adams is on the winning team again. All of that and more in the next 89 minutes. But first, Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. The first of a group of off-road enthusiasts trapped by heavy snow overnight in the central Otago high country are expected to arrive in the town of Roxburgh about now. Rescuers reached them this afternoon and are using a snowmobile to bring them down below the snow line. They're then being transferred to four-wheel drive vehicles for the trip back to Roxburgh. The group of 38, including several children, were trapped in 13 vehicles along Waikaia Bush Road, northwest of Roxburgh last night. The area is remote and exposed to weather conditions. The rescued people are being told they made a bad call tackling the area so close to winter. The Southern President of the New Zealand Four-Wheel Drive Association, Russell Quinn, says the stranded group is not one of its members and appears to be called Southern Mudrats from Invercargill. He says he's feeling for them and their mistake.
It would be a bad call going up there this time, or whether they looked at the weather forecast or this has just come in quickly and caught them out. Obviously has caught them out.
Russell Quinn says the Waikaia Bush Road can be treacherous but popular in summer because it's so challenging. The road will be closed for the winter from Queen's Birthday weekend. And motorists are being warned to drive to the conditions with flooding and snow in parts of Otago and Southland expected to last into the evening. Snow warnings are in place for Arthur's Pass, Lewis Pass and Porter's Pass, and motorists considering using those routes should have chains available for use. In the Clutha district, the council said flood flows are now in the lower reaches of most rivers in the district and are expected to peak overnight. In Thailand, a fire has swept through a school dormitory, killing at least 17 girls aged 5 to 12. The police say the blaze broke out in the private school as the children from hill tribe villages in the northern province of Chiang Rai were sleeping. At least 5 others were injured in the blaze and 2 are missing. The cause of the fire is not known. Jetstar has been fined for allowing a deported passenger to fly back to New Zealand despite being told 3 times not to let him on board the flight. Immigration authorities say the airline's check-in agent at Bangkok Airport entered the Chilean passenger's name 3 times into the passenger processing system, and each time it returned a do not board directive. The check-in agent then put a wrongly spelled name in the system and it returned a directive to board with the New Zealand-bound ticket. Immigration New Zealand says the case was serious because the deportation order against the passenger excluded him from returning here for 5 years. The world's largest insurance company, AXA, says it's divesting itself of all its tobacco-related assets. The French multinational says that amounts to $1.9 billion worth of equity and bonds. AXA executives say there'll be a short-term cost, but they argue that in the long run, investing in a product the World Health Organization estimates will claim hundreds of millions of lives this century is unsustainable. The Auckland Council says it won't be possible to give families access to ashes that were moved 40 years ago without disturbing other ashes. Some families are angry they've only just found out the ashes of their relatives at Waikumete Cemetery were moved in the 60s and 70s while demolitions were taking place. They're asking the council to open the vaults so some can take the remains home. But the cemetery's manager, Catherine Moore, says it's not that simple.
As soon as we open up those vaults, going to have to disturb and move other people's ashes. They were all labelled at the time. They've been buried for nearly 40 years. We don't know whether all the labels are going to be attached. We don't know if they'll still be legible.
Catherine Moore says despite public notices put out when the ashes were first moved, some families still don't know their relatives are there and some have said they don't want them disturbed. A law banning so-called legal highs comes into force in Britain this week, with some fearing it will drive dealers to what's known as the dark web. The substances, which mimic the effects of traditional drugs such as ecstasy and cannabis, are being outlawed amid concerns they've been linked to deaths and are fueling antisocial behaviour. But the blanket ban has been branded unscientific, with critics saying it's unenforceable. Ireland introduced a similar law 5 years ago. However, while the shops openly selling the drugs have closed down, use of the substances has increased, and there have been relatively few prosecutions because of the difficulty of proving in court that a substance is psychoactive. In New Zealand, a law came into effect 2 years ago, requiring synthetic cannabis products to pass a testing regime and be sold with a licence. To sport, and a kick to New Zealand basketballer Stephen Adams' groin proved the turning point for the Oklahoma City Thunder in Game 3 of the NBA's Western Conference Finals. Oklahoma beat the reigning champions, the Golden State Warriors, 133-105 to go 2-1 up in the best-of-7 series. Midway through the second quarter, Adams was kicked in the groin by Golden State's Draymond Green. However, Oklahoma star Kevin Durant told ESPN the incident wasn't the motivating factor for the team, then going on a 24-5 scoring spree.
We just wanted to keep playing. We wasn't fazed by anything. We didn't let anything distract us. We just kept playing, no matter what.
Game 4 in the series is on Wednesday, again in Oklahoma. A couple of missed putts has proved the difference between a first PGA Tour win and fourth place for New Zealand golfer Tim Wilkinson. He finished 2 shots behind Spaniard Sergio Garcia at the latest event in Texas. It's the 37-year-old's best finish on the PGA Tour since a runner-up finish in 2008, but he concedes he should have done much better this time. Wilkinson's fourth placing earns him almost $400,000. That's the news.
Fighting the internet pirates.
People who are streaming it are the ones that we're going to be going after, and they better have deep pockets.
Honouring the dead.
These are real New Zealanders with real history. There's some soldiers in there, there's Māori bushmen in there, there's family members, real New Zealanders.
A different approach to combating family violence.
Responding to violence with violence. Look, that's how we got into this. Don't take your fist, take a guitar.
Hitting the right note. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Guy Aspinall, weekdays from 6. Then after 9, news as it happens. In-depth conversations with world-leading experts and the latest trends you need to know about. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service have recently updated the weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Showers, some heavy and possibly thundery in the west, clearing tomorrow morning. Heavy rain developing tomorrow afternoon or evening with possible thunderstorms. The Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mainly fine, a brief period of rain tomorrow evening. Whanganui to Wellington also wided up a Buller, Nelson and Marlborough. Showers north of Levin becoming widespread this evening with some heavy falls possible. Becoming fine tomorrow morning, then heavy rain with possible thunderstorms developing from late tomorrow afternoon. For Westland, showers, some heavy, clearing this evening, mostly fine tomorrow, but rain north of Hokitika later. Canterbury, outbreaks of rain, clearing tomorrow morning. Otago, Southland and Fiordland Lakes, showers with sleet or snow above 700 metres, clearing tomorrow morning, fine about the fjords. And for the Chatham Islands, periods of rain. It's coming up to 5:09.
Thanks, Katrina. It is in short winter, right? And on that note, we begin tonight in Alexandria, where police and emergency services have been coordinating the rescue of 38 people trapped in a snowstorm overnight. Now, reports throughout the day have put this at 36, but police are using the figure 38. We will confirm which it is. The people, including at least 2 children, were in a convoy of 4-wheel drive vehicles on a remote off-road on Waikaia Bush Road when they were caught up in a snowstorm. The word road is a very generous description of what really is a rutted track. The group was forced to spend the night in their cars in heavy snow until rescuers were able to reach them this afternoon. In a moment, we'll hear from our Queenstown reporter, Peter Newport, who's in Roxburgh, where the families of the group are awaiting the return of their loved ones. But first, this from Inspector Olaf Jensen, who held a media conference a very short time ago.
At the moment, we are in the process of bringing the 38 people who have been stranded on the Old Man Range by snowcats down to the road end and this side of the Old Man Range. As we speak, that is occurring, and I'm just waiting on an update as to that progress. All persons are fit and well. obviously unexpected overnight stay for them, but as said, people were reasonably well equipped for the overnight stay, and our main aim of this was to effect a safe rescue that included the safety of all persons that were deployed into the field. There's 23 volunteers and search and rescue personnel presently in the field, and our search team numbers are probably in approximately around 50 people during the day. So the severe weather conditions have hampered obviously the rescue attempt, which negated any ability to get in with the helicopter, including the use of the Defence Force to effect a rescue any earlier in the day. Those weather conditions still exist, and we're led to believe that the snowcats coming down the mountain are still coming through quite trying conditions.
Inspector Olaf Jansen speaking a very short time ago. I think the key phrase from what he just said, as you will have heard, was all persons are fit and well. He used the number 38. Reports throughout the day of 36. Our Queenstown reporter Peter Newport is in Roxburgh, where relatives of those people who were caught in the snowstorm are waiting for their family members to come down off the mountain. Hi Peter, any sign of the group yet?
No, John, it's been a day of delays and uncertainty. The latest news is that they had hoped to use helicopters to bring these people halfway down the mountain and then put them into a large bus, and we're waiting here at Roxburgh at the rescue centre for that bus to arrive. But the helicopters, once again, couldn't get up the mountain, so they're having to use this snowcat. We originally thought they were snowmobiles, that was how they were described to us, but they're big snowcats, similar to the vehicles used to groom ski slopes. So they're using those snowcats to ferry people from the abandoned four-wheel drive vehicles down to four-wheel drive vehicles that belong to the police, then down to the road, and it could be an hour, it could be 2 hours before we actually see that bus arrive here in Roxburgh. And then those survivors are going to be treated to some hot food, they're going to have some medical checks, and then the last stage is they get to talk to us, the media, and to their friends and family who are waiting behind me in the golf club.
Yeah, boy, I bet they'll be pleased to see them. Peter, rescue helicopters came in first of all, then a military helicopter came in, just simply that the cloud was too heavy and too low for those helicopters to be able to be safely used. Is that the case?
That's right, John, and they tried sneaking in from the south and from the north. It wasn't just the low cloud either, John. It was very high winds, 50, 60, 70 km/h winds along the ridges. That wind blew the snow into drifts that in some cases were 3 metres deep.
Wow.
So, I mean, we have gone from autumn weather to the depths of winter really in less than 24 hours. And this group just got caught right in the teeth of it.
Yeah, they sure did. Can we talk about how cold it was overnight? Obviously the cars had fuel, but eventually fuel runs out. What sort of temperatures were there up Waikawa Road last night?
We're thinking about -5 to -10, John, and then you may even have to factor in a bit more for the wind chill factor. But, I mean, on the plus side of the balance sheet, these were four-wheel drive enthusiasts, and they had cans of diesel with them, so they had some spare fuel. I've been speaking to some relatives waiting in the golf club behind me. They had some contact, they had very patchy cell phone signals, so these people trapped in their cars in this incredibly deep snow were speaking to friends and family occasionally. But I think it's fair to say that as the day wore on and those helicopter attempts failed and failed and failed, anxiety rates went up as well. And I think this afternoon it was all looking very tenuous. I saw a lot of worried faces around here, even on hardened police officers and hardened rescue people. But then, you know, the good news came through that the snowcats that I mentioned earlier had managed to literally crawl up the slope and discover these vehicles that were spread over 100 metres. And then almost symbolically, the Air Force helicopter flew over the rescue centre here in Roxburgh at high speed, almost in a celebratory way to say, well, there you go, a result. And now it feels like we're going through the process of bringing these people back to civilization.
Peter Newport, live from Roxburgh. Peter, we're going to come back to you the moment they arrive. There's an appearance or any further news. Thank you so much. Quite an extraordinary rescue effort, because the same reason those vehicles got stuck on that track made it very, very difficult to get to them. Heavy snow, it's not much of a track to start with. In fact, it's going to be closed from Queen's Birthday weekend, which is the first weekend of June, for the rest of winter. Incredibly difficult conditions. As Peter said, the choppers couldn't get in and they had to send the big, big snow clearers in. They are, we believe, and Inspector Olaf Jensen said they are on the way out. The moment they make it down to Roxburgh, we will cross back to Peter. Meanwhile, Central Otago roading engineers say the four-wheel drive group was taking a huge risk, tackling a treacherous track, notoriously so close to winter. Our Otago reporter, Ian Telfer, found the dangers of the road are well known.
The Southern President of the New Zealand Four-Wheel Drive Association, Russell Quinn, says the stranded group's not one of its members. He believes the group's called the Southern Mud Rats, who come from Invercargill. Mr Quinn says they seem to have made a bad call and he's feeling for them.
Well, it's certainly a wilderness road. It's quite swampy up there in places. You wouldn't go up there by yourself, and I would think, a minimum of 3 vehicles. They've got 13, so they'd have more chance of getting through with that, but obviously they're stuck in 1.5 metre to 2 metre snow. So, they'll be in a bit of stoop at the moment.
Russell Quinn says the Waikaia Bush Road is treacherous and popular in summer because it's so challenging.
It's a fantastic area for four-wheel driving, and the remoteness. People like going up there to look at the views, and to go four-wheel driving. It's one of the iconic areas in New Zealand, and well known.
The road's not much more than a rough track, climbing to about 1,500 metres on the Old Man Range, straddling Central Otago and Northern Southland. Central Otago's roading manager, Murray Hasler, says the track's one of the roughest around.
Normally you'd be doing it when it's reasonably dry, because there's some pretty treacherous bogs at the top, and there's some extremely slippery areas as well. From the forecaster, it probably wasn't too surprising, the conditions that have actually occurred up there.
A Southland District Council roading engineer, Bruce Miller, says the council closes the road on its side from Queen's Birthday weekend in early June, but it wasn't early enough this time.
The main reason it's closed is for safety. It's not because of the road condition or anything. It's to stop people going through there and causing exactly what's happened here. Where you get the civil defence call out, and a lot of people involved in it, and the cost of it all, so it should be closed. It's a whole safety factor.
Bruce Miller says local farmers have risked their own safety pulling out ill-prepared motorists, and people need to think more carefully about the road's risks before setting out. In Dunedin for Checkpoint, Ian Telfer.
Just repeating, Peter Newport is standing by for the people who have been rescued. They are coming down to Roxburgh, and we will cross back to him the moment that occurs. It's 18 minutes past 5 on Checkpoint as winter very much sets in the south, as it does every year. There's been some heavy rainfall in Dunedin. Whilst it's nowhere near as bad as the flooding of last June, there's been surface flooding in some of the same parts of South Dunedin. Locals are saying that once again the stretched and dated stormwater system has struggled to cope. We talked about this extensively on Checkpoint last month, and we spoke to the Mayor of Dunedin at the time, who admitted work does need to be done. Well, today, with the first heavy winter rains causing more flooding, Dave Ure of Ravelston Street is feeling a very wet sense of deja vu.
The only stormwater drain that's in close vicinity is the one across the road. Now, obviously, it's on a different slope. The way the road's made, it slopes away towards that direction. So any runoff in that direction's fine, but there's nowhere for the water to go on this corner section. It can't go anywhere, so it just sits on our section.
What's your sense of how the council is looking after South Dunedin, your area, your community?
I think they could have done more. Given that this is not the first time it's happened. There was an issue with some of the mud tanks not being cleaned out due to a previous contractor not fulfilling his obligations or something. But anyway, that's not my problem. Pay rates stuff should be done, and here we are happening again. So my neighbour, I believe, has been in contact with the Dunedin City Council, and they've sent her a reply back saying that they need to come and have a look and sort out a solution, and they're probably going to put another drain, another tank, or another wastewater system between our house and the area that gets flooded. but that's not going to happen for 12 months due to costings.
So wait a sec, so you are going to have to wait 12 months for any relief from what is now becoming regular for you?
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. It's not only horrible to deal with, everything in the yard's now floating around the place. Our house pretty much in the bedroom sounds like you're living in a riverboat. So now we've got water underneath the house. I've got young kids. It's coming into winter. What's that going to do? It's going to be horrible.
Can you describe what's outside now, Dave?
I can. If I had goldfish, I'd probably throw some in there. The whole section is underwater. The whole section's underwater. And because our house is on piles, obviously, that water continues through underneath the house as well. This morning when I got up at 5 o'clock to have a look, you couldn't get out the gate. It was knee deep. You just couldn't go anywhere. The cats were stuck inside. The pets can't go outside and do what they do in the morning. So it's just a nightmare. It's a messy nightmare they've got to sort out again.
And is it your sense that every time now you get fairly heavy rain in Dunedin, your part of South Dunedin is going to flood like this?
Absolutely. Until they sort out this water issue, it's got nowhere to go. It's going to come back, and our section is going to get flooded, which causes all sorts of problems. Not amongst the health issue is one of them. It's a pain in the butt to fix, to tidy up again. Everything in the shed's floating around. But what about the property values? They can't be doing any favours there. So, it's just a nightmare. What do you do?
What do you say to the council? What would you like them to do?
I'd like them to get their asses around here and sort the problem out before next winter. It's not acceptable that they have to go away and get costings. Regardless of what it costs, it's got to be fixed.
So that's the situation on Ravelston Street. What does the council say? Well, they declined to be interviewed. They also said there wasn't any flooding, despite the pictures provided to us, which if you're watching you will have just seen, and the pictures very clearly visible in the Otago Daily Times today. They then referred us to their Facebook page for updates. We went there and it said, and I quote, "There is surface flooding and ponding on roads across the city, including North Dunedin, South Dunedin and Mosgiel. Leaves blocking the mud tank grates have exacerbated the problem." Now, below that council update were comments from residents of Glen Road, Kaikorai Valley Road, Green Island and Portobello Road, reporting flooding and blocked drains there. This does seem to be becoming quite a regular problem in Dunedin. We would like to hear from you if that does affect you. "5:23. Coming up, how did you watch Joseph Parker's fight at the weekend? Did you watch it at all? And if you did you pay to view it, or did you somehow watch it for free? The fight's promoter, Duco Events, considers legal action against people who live streamed the fight on Facebook. Plus, the relative of a man whose ashes have been moved twice by the country's largest cemetery without her knowledge says she can't believe it and wants his remains back. And it's another win for the Oklahoma City Thunder in basketball's Western Conference Finals. This is the US, of course, but Stevens Adams' groin came off second best after a battle with Golden State Warrior Draymond Green. All of that and more coming up. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. Any feedback at all, text us 2101, email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz, and Facebook and Twitter, Checkpoint RNZ. Thousands watched boxer Joseph Parker take on Carlos Takam at the weekend, but it's the way they watched it which is now sparking controversy, discussion, a lot of opinions being expressed. The fight promoter, Duco Events, is vowing to go after people who watch the match for free on Facebook. However, legal experts warn it's an untested area of the law. Yes, this is all new. If the company does take legal action, it would be the first case of its kind in New Zealand. Anusha Bradley reports.
Sky TV charged $49.99 to watch Joseph Parker fight Carlos Takam on Saturday night, but tens of thousands also watched it for free after Porirua man Mose Galo streamed it live on his Facebook page, Beast Mose. Mr. Galo says Sky's price tag was exorbitant and calls himself a modern-day Robin Hood. But people on the streets of Auckland today were not so sure if he's a hero or a villain.
He's a villain because everybody else paid for it, so he should have. And he shouldn't give it away for nothing, because it's a business these guys are running.
It's a bit sad for the people that are actually, trying to get the funds for it. But at the end of the day, the thing is technology and everyone's doing it now. So, yeah, I'm not too sure. 50-50 on that.
Villain. Well, he didn't pay for it.
wasn't his to stream. Thought it was a fair price. It was a good fight. It was well worth the money. A few of us put money in and paid for it, so it wasn't that dear.
He's a hero. Good on him.
I think Sky is overpriced, and if they just charged everybody $10 each, a lot more people would have bought it off them. That's the reason I didn't buy it.
Sky TV spokesperson Kirsty Way says whatever way it's sliced, it's stealing, and Sky is now considering its legal options against those who broadcast the fight illegally.
It is theft, it is illegal, and we'll be following the process to make sure that we get a good result.
Duco Event says it plans to chase the viewers too, saying they can be tracked on Facebook. The Deputy Chief Executive of Internet NZ, Andrew Cushion, says that could be difficult and he'd be concerned if Facebook shared those details.
I'm not aware of an incident where Facebook has disclosed that sort of information. When you start to think about what that would actually mean, that's actually pretty chilling to think that Facebook would start to disclose who has seen certain posts.
Facebook told RNZ News it has tools in place to allow content owners to report potential infringements, but it did not respond to questions about whether it would disclose the details of those who watched it. No company has ever brought a case against viewers of an illegal stream in New Zealand. Intellectual property expert Grant Elliott QC says it's an untested area of law.
The question really is whether the viewers were downloading the work, the fight in other words, or whether it was in some transient or temporary form. And that's, I think, where streaming is causing difficulties. It's sort of in between the two. It's time that there was a case which went to the court so they could actually determine where this dividing line is.
Mose Gallo did not respond to requests for an interview, but fans of his Facebook page are already offering to chip in to help with any potential legal costs if they're needed. For Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
The relative of a man whose ashes have been moved twice by the country's biggest cemetery without her knowledge says she can't believe what's happened and she wants his remains back. The ashes of more than 1,800 people were relocated within Auckland's Waikomete Cemetery in the 1960s and again in the 1970s without the family's consent. They went into 4 buried vaults, and as Mohammed Hassan reports, the Auckland Council now says the ashes are stuck there.
Leon Johnston has been digging into her family history. Her uncle, David Gordon Fraser, was killed in a motorbike accident in 1947, not long after he'd come back from the Second World War. The 23-year-old's body was cremated at Waikomete Cemetery.
I can remember going there as a child with my mother and seeing ashes in a remembrance wall or something. And all the records showed old Waikomete Cemetery. There hasn't been anything to indicate that they were moved or anything.
But then Leon Johnston stumbled upon a Facebook page called Honour the 1800 and found out ashes had been moved twice at the cemetery, once in 1969 after the crematorium was demolished, and again in either 1976 or 1977. None of the families of those whose ashes were moved were contacted at the time, and the ashes now rest in 4 sealed vaults, with nothing but a list of names recording that they were ever moved. Miss Johnson's uncle is on that list.
They should have contacted relatives to let them know. I believe that they put an ad or something in the New Zealand Herald, but I know that my grandparents didn't subscribe to the Herald. They used to get the Auckland Star. Hadn't changed their phone number at all, and they were, living in close by in Onehunga at the time they moved them all around. I don't think it's too much to try and make some sort of contact. I'm angry.
Miss Johnson now lives in Sydney, but an aunt lives in Christchurch, and she doesn't know what's happened to her brother's ashes.
I'm too scared to tell her. I think she'd be far too distressed, and she's an old lady of 90 and not very well. So, at this stage, I think I'm better, keeping that to myself.
Leon Johnston says she'd like access to her uncle's ashes so she can take them to be scattered in Christchurch, where other family members have been laid to rest. And she's not alone. The founder of the Honour the 1800 Facebook page, Terry Ferguson, is taking legal action against the council to get his great-grandfather's ashes back. He set up the page to help other families check if their loved ones are in the cemetery and get them on board with his campaign. An Auckland resident, Garth Holtham, was on the page this morning when he noticed 2 familiar names.
I thought, right, I'll just have a look and see if I can find any of my relatives in there. And I certainly haven't been through it completely, but within a short period of time I found at least 2 relatives who were, their ashes are in this situation. Wasn't very happy. In fact, that they've dug a hole in the ground, put a concrete sort of tomb thing in there and basically dropped them in and then covered it over. The least they could have done was at least mark the spot with something to indicate that, you know, these people are buried there.
Mr. Holtham says he's going to get in touch with his relatives' immediate family to let them know. He doesn't think they'll want to take back the ashes, but he thinks others, like Terry Ferguson and Leon Johnston, deserve to do so. But Auckland Council's manager of cemeteries, Catherine Moore, says that's unlikely to happen.
As soon as we open up those vaults, we're going to have to disturb and move other people's ashes. They were all labelled at the time. They've been buried for nearly 40 years. We don't know whether all the labels are going to be attached. We don't know if they'll still be legible. We have to consider all those kinds of issues as well.
While the ashes have already been disturbed, Ms. Moore says some families have now been in touch with the council asking for it not to happen again. She says it's unrealistic to expect to be able to get all of the ashes back to their families.
In order to be able to identify for nearly 2,000 sets of ashes who would be the correct person to give individual permission, we just don't think that's going to be feasible this many years later in the process.
She says the council is trying to reach out to the families to discuss a fitting tribute for their relatives' remains. For Checkpoint, Mohammed Hassan.
Sometimes on Checkpoint you receive feedback and you think, oh gosh, that's a good point. Well, often, because your feedback's fantastic. But this one from Dave Towers, just bullseye. Hi, John. Imagine the conversation if the people driving those four-wheel drives had been tourists. End of email. Bang on, Dave. Yes, it would be a very pointed conversation indeed. Coming up, the man killed while watching a motocross event at Cambridge Racecourse yesterday was standing next to his wife of 43 years at the time. Australia's Victoria state government cracks down on people renting Airbnb accommodation for parties. We go back to one of the homeless families we met last week who is in emergency housing. It's costing them about $1,100 a week for, well, rooms that are modest, to describe it generously. And then we hear of a really astronomical emergency housing debt. And Wellington Circa Theatre celebrates 40 years of bringing entertainment to the capital. But first, Katrina Batten with the headlines.
A group of off-road enthusiasts are being ferried to the town of Roxburgh after being trapped by heavy snow in the central Otago high country overnight. Rescuers reached the party of 38, including several children, this afternoon. The group had been stranded in 13 vehicles along the remote Waikawa Bush Road. The New Zealand Four-Wheel Drive Association says the group made a bad call in tackling the area so close to winter. Flooding and snow in parts of Otago and Southland are expected to last into the evening, and drivers are being warned to drive to the conditions. Motorists are advised to have chains available for journeys through Arthur's Pass, Lewis Pass and Porter's Pass, where snow warnings are in place. In the Clutha district, the council says flood flows in the lower reaches of most rivers are expected to peak overnight, and several roads in West Otago will remain closed. A fire has swept through a school dormitory in northern Thailand, killing at least 17 girls while they were sleeping. At least 5 others were injured in the blaze and 2 are missing. Jetstar has been fined for allowing a deported passenger to fly back to New Zealand after being directed 3 times not to let him on board the flight. Immigration authorities say when the airline's check-in agent at Bangkok Airport wrongly spelt the Chilean passenger's name, the system returned a directive to board with the New Zealand-bound ticket. Immigration New Zealand says the case was serious because the deportation order against the passenger excluded him from returning here for 5 years. An intellectual property expert says suing viewers who watch illegally streamed videos is an untested area of law. The promoter of Joseph Parker's boxing match wants to identify and sue the people who illegally watch the match for free on Facebook. But Clive Elliott QC says it's unclear in the law whether streaming is considered the same as downloading or whether it's more temporary in nature, which is allowed. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6 with more news, sport and weather.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Turning Turning now to business news with Nona Peltier, as we do after the 5:30 headlines. Nona, you've been looking at a few company results today.
Yeah, it's a busy week. It's another reporting season started. So these are companies with balance dates at March 31st. So they're reporting now. And we're going to have about, at least a dozen that we can point to this week and more. But today we had Orion Health, which is a big healthcare software provider. And they made another loss. Big loss, but not as big as the one last year. And so $54 million loss. That's better than before. And they're expecting to make a profit in probably a couple of years. So they are looking at...
Did they explain why they made a loss?
Yeah, they're just investing in growth. So a lot of these companies that are selling software and expanding have to invest an awful lot of money to grow these markets. So not just in terms of product development, but also, staff, people on the ground making those sales and expanding into markets of Europe and the United States and Canada. So yeah, it's expensive for Orion to do that. And that's where they're spending their money. Now, of course, when you bought a stake in that company, you were buying a stake in a growth business. And that really, when you're buying shares, you look at growth. That's companies that tend to make losses, hate to say, but or income, ones that are steady as she goes. And a good example of that is Fisher & Paykel. Will report later in the week. At the end of the week, we're going to have, and that's a company that not only delivers growth but income too.
So this is Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, is it?
Yes, Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. Yeah, they're very, the darling of the market for sure, because they seem to have all of the pieces.
So they can expand and run at a profit at the same time.
Exactly. So Orion's hoping to do that as well. Orion's a very big company, and it's not performed very well, mostly because some people have said that New Zealand market, it really doesn't like high-tech companies very much, don't react very well. That's one school of thought. On the other side, we did have another company that reported, this was their maiden profit. This was a company that listed the year before. It's called Evolve, and they specialize in early childhood development and schools. And so what they've done is they've gone around buying up all these early childhood care
so like preschools and
that sort of thing. Yep. And they made a $15.6 million profit. Well, wow. So they're delivering
in only year 2 or year 3.
Yeah, that's right. They listed in 2014. So, anyways, big week ahead. Not least of all because of all these companies reporting. Also, we're going to have the global dairy price, latest prices. The Fonterra forecast is expected on the Farmgate milk price. And the budget is the other big thing this week.
On Thursday,
so that's an awful lot of stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Nona. Are you on all week?
Yes, but you also get our lovely Giles Beckford, who will have the goods on the budget because he's focusing mostly on that this week. Okay. And we're going to look after the company reports.
Right, what did the markets do today?
Yeah, little changed. The top 50 index, we were down only 2 points to 6,908. And again, the dollar's hardly budged, 67.9 US cents and 93.7 Australian.
Thank you very much indeed, Nona. With a slightly husky voice, are you okay?
Yeah, I've had a bit of a cold. I noticed that you have a bit one too.
Yeah. It's the air conditioning in this building. Right, 5:37 is the time. The man killed while watching a motocross event at a Cambridge racecourse yesterday was standing next to his wife of 43 years at the time. 63-year-old Bruce Honore was hit by a motocross bike that came off the track yesterday afternoon. His wife was also injured but was discharged from hospital today. Alex Ashton reports.
Bruce Honore lived in the rural Waikato town of Ngāhingapori. Yesterday, he and his wife were watching their grandson ride in a motocross event run by the Cambridge Motocross Club, about half an hour from their home at the racecourse in Leamington. Their daughter, Tanya Honore, told me her parents were married for 43 years and had 4 grandchildren and 2 more on the way. Ms Honore says her mother, who was injured and flown to Waikato Hospital, is back at home but heartbroken by the loss. Motorcycling New Zealand's president, Glenn Williams, was in Wellington on Sunday, celebrating the club's 100-year anniversary. He was with about 300 other motorcyclists when he heard the news.
Muted silence, really. Obviously, we're all pretty close together in the motorcycle sport area. Yes, it certainly very much put a damper on proceedings.
The Serious Crash Unit and WorkSafe are both trying to figure out exactly what went wrong. Online, the Cambridge Motocross Club dubbed it a freak tragedy, and other motorcycle clubs posted messages of support. Checkpoint understands the driver wasn't hurt. Glenn Williams says he's never heard of a bike leaving the track and hitting a spectator, and now it's a waiting game to see what comes of the investigations.
We'd like to know what the outcomes are as soon as possible, of course, so we can act quickly if it's required to be acted. But it's until we have the information, but we certainly won't be ignoring anything that comes out of it.
Glenn Williams says his thoughts are with the family and the club. For Checkpoint, Alex Ashton.
Across the Tasman, it's quarter time in the election campaign there, and two very different styles are emerging between the two leaders. The opposition leader, Bill Shorten, has been hitting the pavement in daily meetings with voters, while the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, has been spending time visiting ports, shipyards and small businesses. Quite distinctive branding going on. The ABC's Jane Norman is part of the travelling political roadshow, and she sent us this report.
Being on the election campaign trail is like buying a ticket for a magical mystery tour. The only certainty is the starting time and place, where the travelling media is bundled onto a bus or plane headed for destination unknown. But for the two parties, each event is a highly organised and tightly controlled affair that's usually planned about 10 days in advance. Cabinet Secretary Arthur Sinodinos is a campaign veteran and is travelling with the Prime Minister as an advisor. For them, there is just one theme.
The strategy has been to highlight the main messages from the budget around our plan for jobs and growth.
So what is a good day for you guys on the campaign, and how do you measure that?
A good day is a day where you're able to get your message across and you largely stay out of trouble. Now, the great thing about campaigns, and the thing that makes it endlessly fascinating for all of us, is there's an X factor. You don't know what's around the corner.
Jobs and growth is the mantra, but the coalition's also selling brand Turnbull. The signage behind the Prime Minister at his press conferences urges voters to back the Turnbull coalition team, which cuts against the claim that he's lost his lustre.
Every election is fundamentally built around a leader. Particularly in the Liberal Party, we put great store by the attributes of the leader. So this is very much about Malcolm Turnbull as a Liberal, Malcolm Turnbull's Liberals, taking the country through the next decade.
The Labor message is about putting people first, and nearly every day Bill Shorten has been among them in street walks and town halls. It appears to be working, with images of the opposition leader being embraced, serenaded and even kissed on the street. These moments are more than colour, they amplify the people-focused theme. Labor's Sam Dastyari is travelling with Bill Shorten.
And what's really been, I think, working in the Labor campaign has been that openness, that preparedness to actually engage and get involved with people.
Is Labor taking a bit of a nothing ventured, nothing gained approach to this campaign?
Definitely. Look, you have to take risks in campaigns. And Bill is very, very clear that he wants to actually get out there and talk to people. And frankly, that's what people want.
Is Labor's message getting across?
I believe it is.
The Turnbull campaign seems more buttoned up, even a bit sterile, but the coalition says it's not concerned. The early days are just a warm-up to the main game, which will kick off around June 14, when pre-poll voting begins. Then, as one insider puts it, things get real.
That from the ABC. Australia in the middle of their campaign. Austria's gone to the polls at the weekend, but the final result was almost a dead heat, and it's too close to call. A very quick report from Nathan Frandino telling us what's going on there. Who becomes president is now dependent on the outcome of postal votes.
It's now a waiting game for both the media and the presidential candidates in Austria.
We have to wait until tomorrow, of course.
Right-wing Freedom Party candidate Norbert Hofer leads with 51.9% of the vote, according to the provisional results. His opponent, the independent Alexander van der Bellen, has 48.1%, making the election too close to call just yet.
Let's see what they say.
The two candidates now must wait for postal ballots to be counted, which is not due to finish until Monday evening. If Hofer wins, he would become the European Union's first far-right head of state.
Yes, that's a fascinating election, that one. Real time and place stuff, isn't it, in Austria? We will obviously report on the result of that as the week goes on. Back home, secondary school principals say their ability to punish foreign students for banned behaviour outside of school time is being put to the test. The International Education Appeal Authority says Tauranga Boys College broke the Education Act by sending 3 German boys home who'd smoked marijuana. But the college is seeking a judicial review of that decision. This is all somewhat confusing. When did the boys smoke the dope, and was the punishment too heavy? Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The Education Act prohibits schools from punishing students for actions outside school hours and off school grounds. But in the High Court in Wellington today, lawyers acting for Tauranga Boys College said the expulsion of the boys in 2014 was covered by contracts signed by their parents. The principal of Tauranga Boys College, Robert Mangan, says the school took the case to clear up what schools can and can't do.
We've sought judicial review because I think we've got a responsibility to clarify for the industry and for all other principals in the country actually what they should do if this issue happens again. I don't have clarity if this was to happen again this weekend about how I should deal with that.
Robert Mangan says schools need to know if their contracts with the parents of foreign students take precedence over the Education Act.
There is a disagreement between whether we can use contractual law or whether we can use education law. So international students do fall under the Education Act. However, there's this real grey area about what happens at 6:30 on a Friday night or the other 18 hours when they're outside school hours.
The principal of John Paul College in Rotorua, Patrick Walsh, is on the executive of the Secondary Principals Association and a qualified lawyer. He says the situation faced by Tauranga Boys College is relatively common.
There are students who drink to excess, who gamble and do other activities which compromises their safety, and conversations take place between the principals and the agents and parents about that sort of activity, resulting in some of them being asked to leave the school or to return home.
Patrick Walsh says it's essential schools' rights and responsibilities are clarified, especially in light of changes to health and safety legislation.
Principals are asking the question, do we have jurisdiction over international students outside of school hours, and are we responsible for them? And this case clearly indicates that this is a grey area, and given the large number of international students in secondary schools throughout the country, it's a matter that the Ministry of Education needs to turn its mind to and get sorted.
The executive director of the school's International Business Association, John van der Swan, says contracts are how schools ensure students behave themselves, and that has implications on the way New Zealand schools are regarded overseas.
It's essential that there's some clarity around this one to firstly protect the students that come here, but also to kind of protect the reputation of New Zealand as a quality education destination for these students. So I think the outcome of this case is going to be really important for the school sector.
Justice Ellis finished hearing the case in the High Court today and has reserved her decision. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
Feedback coming in on Duco, the $50. People paying to watch the boxing and people not paying to watch the boxing. Really split. I pay a fortune for Sky already, and then I have to pay even more to watch something on Sky. Sky is a rip-off already and costs just too much. I guess the name suits when it comes to money. The sky is the limit. Heaps of people like me can't watch the fight or any sports and haven't been able to for years because of costs, yet I've always worked, paid my taxes and have never had to pay a fine. I continue to feel a loser because I can't afford such luxuries. In quotation marks. Thanks, Di. And Susan says, "Hi, John. We paid to watch and it was worth every cent. What an inspiration." Which brings us to sport. There's been plenty of talk in the sporting world for a Monday, from the All Blacks Sevens to the NBA and a little bit of golf as well. Here to tell us about it is our sports reporter, Matt Chatterton. I'm just going to cough momentarily. Excuse me. Right, Matt. First, the Sevens. We won the plate at the final event on the Sevens circuit. The London Sevens got beaten by the USA in the quarterfinals, right?
Yes.
Can we read too much into that?
No is the short answer. I don't think the New Zealand public need to be too concerned just yet. There's still about 3 months until the Olympics. Sir Gordon Titchens did not have his full-strength team here in London for this event. He had a number of key injuries. Sonny Bill Williams went down in the quarterfinal with minor ankle injury, I believe. So there's nothing really to worry about at this point.
Except the really exciting thing for me is we're seeing Scotland suddenly play out of their skin. We're seeing the USA suddenly playing out of their skin, although that's the second time in the past few months they've beaten us, right? Do they have that guy who was almost in the Olympic?
Carlin Isles.
Yeah, is he playing for them? Was he playing for them in London?
I didn't actually watch too much of it myself. I didn't see
How quick is that dude?
That guy ran, I think it was in the teens, I think. He's fast. Let's put it that way. But yeah, short answer, no, don't read too much into it. Yes, I think come Rio, we'll have a full strength side and fingers crossed, and there will be far more, I think, competitive nature from them when they've got a gold medal on the line.
Okay, great. Let's talk about basketball. Stephen Adams got a kick in the
groin. Yes, so the New Zealand basketballer Stephen Adams was playing in Game 3 of the NBA's Eastern Conference Finals in the United States today. They were playing the Golden State Warriors. In the second quarter, Adams was unfortunately kicked in the groin by Golden State's Draymond Green. OKC, or Oklahoma City Thunder, went on to win the match 133-105. They've gone 2-1 up in the series, which is good news. Yes, unfortunately, Adams did receive a bit of a knock that reduced his time on court. I think he only played 17 minutes all up, 8 points and 5 rebounds. So not the best game, but I think they were trying to sort of save his time on court and his body parts. Yeah. So we've actually got a response from Draymond Green, the man who kicked Stephen Adams in there. This was his response to the questions surrounding it.
Honestly, I didn't know I hit him. I walked to the three-point line, and when I turned around, he's on the floor. I don't know how anyone could possibly say, I did that on purpose.
Yeah, well, that's his response. Here's Russell Westbrook, Stephen Adams' teammate. This was his thoughts on the incident.
I think it's intentional. That's 2 times in the last 2 games. Can't keep kicking somebody in their private areas.
As you heard there, he mentioned that was the second time in 2 games. Draymond Green did this in Game 2 that Golden State won. So this is a recurring incident. But
same dude, Draymond Green.
Same guy, but this is probably the best part. Listen to Stephen Adams' response here when he talked about it. He was very short and sweet.
Happened before, mate. He's pretty accurate, that guy.
So he didn't want to say too much about it. He's
Although
moving
if he's saying
on.
he's accurate, he's saying that he's aiming, right?
But he wanted to move on from it. Draymond Green, funnily enough, in the other NBA finals going on in the Eastern Conference at the moment, a player from the Cleveland Cavaliers has just been suspended for 1 game for doing the exact same thing as Draymond Green. So there's in the next few days we'll find out whether or not they are in fact going to suspend him from the finals.
Can we stay in the Adams family?
Yes, we can indeed, because Valerie Adams, Stephen Adams' sister, has won her first meeting of the Diamond League Northern Tour. She threw a 19.68 metre throw.
That's her best for a while, isn't it?
It is. And while there wasn't the strongest field at this competition, to get that win under her belt in the lead up to the Olympics is going to be a massive confidence boost. So that's always a big plus for her going into the Rio in the lead up to Rio. Also, on the topic of other sports today, Tim Wilkinson, the Palmerston North golfer, he finished in a tie for 4th at the AT&T Byron Nelson on the PGA Tour. It's his best finish since 2008, so well done to Tim. Danny Lee finished in a tie for 18th. And Lisa Carrington has won gold and silver at the Canoe Sprint World Cup in Germany. She won silver in the K1 500 overnight, and the day before she won the gold in K1 200, the other metres, so 500 metres and 200 metres.
For people who don't know Lisa Carrington, she is one of the most delightful people in New Zealand sport, and she wants 2 golds in Rio, doesn't she?
She does. She's going to be tough to beat, I have a feeling. It's promising to be a good Rio Olympics for New Zealand. I think in the lead up there have been a number of stories coming out about that they're predicting that this is going to be New Zealand's best medal haul at the Olympics.
You don't want to tempt fate.
You don't,
but my sense is the Olympic Committee, the people in charge, the people who've selected this team and the people who are sending them have very high hopes indeed, right?
The strength of the talent going to the Olympics for most nations is good, but I think in particular New Zealand we are looking good on track.
Yeah. Excellent. Matt Chatterton, as always, very good to talk to you. Thanks, Matt. It's coming up to 7 minutes to 6. After 6 o'clock, we're going to revisit one of the families who we met last week. They were living in emergency housing. It wasn't very nice emergency housing, although it was keeping them dry and warm. But the fact of the matter was, it was costing them over $1,100 a week. They had to get the money from WINS. They have to repay the money. If they had money, they wouldn't need emergency housing. So they're caught betwixt and between. We go back to them to see how they're going, and during the course of that conversation we hear quite an extraordinary story. That's coming up after 6. It's becoming an increasingly popular way to hold a party and an easy way for property owners to make a quick buck. We're talking about the use of websites such as Airbnb, where people can book short-term accommodation and party up large at someone else's place. But some horror stories are starting to emerge, and the Victorian State Government is now moving to try and crack down on those landlords who allow it. to happen. Airbnb is becoming more and more controversial. The ABC's Tom Nightingale reports.
They're known as perpetual party apartments. They're often booked through websites like Airbnb or Stays. Guests are there for only a few nights and they live it up. The Victorian Consumer Affairs Minister Jane Garrett says it can be a nightmare for neighbours.
There's some horror stories where people are running up and down the halls, they're damaging property, music all night, just making people whose home is in the apartment just an unlivable existence.
To try to stop that, the Victorian Government wants to allow neighbours or an owners corporation to take a landlord to the planning tribunal VCAT. It's almost 12 months since the tribunal ruled it could not ban short-term leases under 30 days. But under the government's planned changes, landlords could lose the right to lease their apartments to short-term tenants.
Currently, all that can happen under the existing law is that you go after the guests for a measly $250 and they could be anywhere in the world. So this is about giving neighbours redress, it's about giving owners corporations more power, and it's ultimately about changing behaviour. Most people do exactly the right thing, but where a owner consistently lets out a property to unruly parties, that's where VCAT can step in and protect the amenity for the entire apartment building.
In other parts of the world, short-stay accommodation has a minimum of 5 or 7 days. Elsewhere in Australia, local government approval is required. Paul Salter runs short-term apartments in the Docklands area near Melbourne CBD.
Making the landlord responsible for the actions of a tenant has major flaws. It's like making a hire car company responsible for the speeding fine of the driver. Why would a person who's setting up a business to provide accommodation allow somebody to come in and trash an apartment when the following guest is going to come into something that's trashed? I mean, firstly, you've got the expense of the cleaning up and the repair and to the damage that would be caused from the party to prepare an apartment ready for the next guest. There's no logic in that sort of business model.
He says the changes would be unfair on landlords.
I believe that the problems that it will cause are probably going to now be greater than probably some of the other options that were on the table. Short-term accommodation, 95% of the operators, they in fact are providing a home away from home. If that particular form of accommodation is removed from the tourism pool, it will have dramatic impacts on larger events that come into Melbourne, into any other parts of the state. There'd be more effective ways of weeding out the bad apples and bringing in legislation which is unfair in that it is holding responsible the actual landlord for the actions of another person.
The changes will be introduced into Parliament this week.
Right, it's coming up to 3 minutes to 6, and we're going to go to a story now from the union representing cleaners, which says hundreds of New Zealanders working for the company Spotless are not being paid for all the hours they work, all of the hours. The union, too, is blaming the company's new payroll system for the underpayments, describing it as the Nova pay of the private sector. And yes, Spotless acknowledges there have been problems, but is confident the majority have now been fixed. Maya Burry reports.
The Australian-based company employs more than 5,000 people as cleaners and hospital kitchen staff around the country. One of the affected cleaners, who can't speak publicly because of a media ban imposed on workers by Spotless, says he has been underpaid and has had to use his savings to pay the bills. In a statement, he says he owes more than $300 to Housing New Zealand and is having to borrow money to feed his young family.
I save money for the kids, but it's sad. I had to use it to pay overheads. My kids are suffering. Last week I couldn't pay for milk powder for my 4-month-old.
Ed2 Industry Coordinator Jill Ovens says pay problems are systemic among cleaning contractors, but they got worse when a new payroll system was introduced before Christmas last year. She says the union is getting calls most days from workers complaining of underpayment or no payment at all some weeks. Ms Ovens says one example is the Southern Cross School campus in Mangere in South Auckland, where 7 cleaners claimed pay arrears in February of about 300 hours work.
It's just been a nightmare. It's like the Nova pay of the private sector. People are not paid correctly, usually short paid. So there's been just a complete breakdown of the payroll system, and people are telling us that they're owed, hundreds of hours, up to hundreds of hours of work.
Ms Ovens says there are also problems with the voice recognition software used by workers to clock on and off. She says sometimes the software won't recognise a worker's voice, leaving them unable to get into the system to be paid. Spotless admits there have been some short-term discrepancies in payment as a result of the new payroll system, but it's being addressed. It says the voice recognition software works well and puts the errors down to training rather than the system itself. For Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
50 seconds until the pips. Let's have some feedback. I moved to Dunedin 10 years ago. I've never seen a street cleaner or street cleaning machine or drain cleaning machine. Weather has been too bad for individuals to collect leaves off properties, never mind the street. Usual lack of concern from the council. No change there, but we have a fabulous stadium and wonderful rugby team, so all's well. Not. Thank you. Alan from Tokoroa says, hi John, the four-wheel drive enthusiasts were touring, therefore they are tourists. Fair point. This Southern group have done well, someone else said. They had the right gear, vehicles and equipment, plus spare fuel. Don't overreact to a survival with relative ease situation. It's not coal with the right gear. Yeah, military helicopter going in, rescue helicopters going in, lots of searches. A fairly expensive operation for relative ease. But all's well that ends well, I guess. Here's the pips. Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Lovely to have your company. Thank you for being with us. 30 minutes to go on the program tonight. We're going to get the latest on the rescue of the 38 off-roaders in central Otago, up there on that track. Coming out now, we'll reveal the size of one family's debt to wins for emergency housing and check up on one of the families we met last week. And Wellington's Circa Theatre turns 40. With absolutely no signs of midlife crisis, unless I guess it's a play by Roger Hall. But first, here is the news with Katrina Batten.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. The 38 people rescued after spending a night trapped in snow in the central Otago high country will be examined by paramedics, though the police say they seem fit and well. A group of off-roaders, including 2 children aged 6 and 8, were trapped in 13 vehicles along Waikaia Bush Road, northwest of Roxburgh last night. Rescuers were unable to reach the group until this afternoon because of atrocious weather. Inspector Olaf Jensen says a snowcat has been bringing them back below the snow line. He says everyone in the group seems to be in good condition.
All persons are fit and well. Obviously unexpected overnight stay for them, but people were reasonably well equipped for the overnight stay, and the parties will be taken from the mountain to a receiving centre in Roxburgh.
Olaf Jensen says St John ambulance staff will examine them before they're fed and taken back to Invercargill. The off-roaders are being told they made a bad call tackling the area so close to winter. The Southern President of the New Zealand Four-Wheel Drive Association, Russell Quinn, says he's feeling for them and their mistake. Mr Quinn says the Waikaia Bush Road can be treacherous but popular in summer because it's so challenging. The road will be closed for the winter from Queen's Birthday weekend. Jetstar has been fined $12,000 for allowing a deported passenger to fly back to New Zealand despite being told 3 times not to let him on board the flight. Immigration authorities say the airline's check-in agent at Bangkok Airport entered the Chilean passenger's name 3 times into the passenger processing system, and each time it returned a do not board directive. The check-in agent then put in a wrongly spelled name in the system and it returned a directive to board with the New Zealand-bound ticket. Immigration New Zealand says the case was serious because the deportation order against the passenger excluded him from returning here for 5 years. Legal and computer experts say illegally streamed videos falls into a grey and untested area of law. The promoter of boxer Joseph Parker's fight is vowing to go after the thousands of viewers who watched the match for free on Facebook and Periscope, while Sky, which had the broadcast rights, charged $50. Anusha Bradley reports.
While it's illegal to download illegal content, it's unclear whether streaming's included in that. Intellectual property lawyer Clive Elliott says streaming sits in the middle of the two, and this area of law has never been tested in a New Zealand court. The fight promoter Duco says the Facebook viewers can be tracked, but Internet NZ says the social media site has never passed on those details to a content owner before, and it would be concerned if it did. Facebook says it has tools to allow content owners to report copyright infringements, but it hasn't responded to questions about whether it would disclose the details of those who watched the Parker fight. This is Anusha Bradley.
Health officials are reporting another case of measles in Northland, bringing the number of confirmed cases to 5. Medical Officer of Health Claire Mills says all the cases are in the Kerikeri Whangaroa area. Vaccination clinics were held in Kerikeri during the weekend and further clinics are planned this week. Dr Mills says there's a window of opportunity now for people to catch up on any missed vaccinations, and it's a better option than having a very sick child at home for a fortnight or a teenager missing 2 weeks of school. The relative of a man cremated at the country's biggest cemetery says she's horrified his ashes were moved without her knowledge. More than 1,800 urns were relocated at Auckland's Waikumete Cemetery in the 60s and 70s because of demolitions and are now in 4 sealed vaults. The Auckland Council says it published a notice in the newspapers, but it didn't contact the families directly. Leonie Johnston's uncle, David Fraser, was cremated at the cemetery in 1947, shortly after he'd come back from the war, and she's angry his remains were moved.
They should have contacted relatives. My grandparents hadn't changed their phone number at all, and they were, living in close by in Onehunga at the time. They moved them all around. I don't think it's too much to try and make some sort of contact. It's a charming way to treat a war veteran.
Leonie Johnston wants his remains to be removed from the vault so she can take him to Christchurch, but the council says it can't do that without disturbing other ashes. Canberra Airport is today beginning a trial of a new body scanner before flights to New Zealand begin in September. The full body scanners, which can detect dangerous items of any material hidden beneath clothing, are an alternative to pat-down searches. The technology will be the first of its kind in Australia. Melbourne and Sydney airports trialled the scanners 5 years ago, but ditched them after concerns were raised over the ability for border staff to see through clothing. In Canberra, passengers will be given a choice about whether to be screened or searched. From September, Singapore Airlines will make Canberra a stopover point on trips between Wellington and Singapore. To sport, and the Golden State Warriors player Draymond Green says he didn't intentionally kick New Zealand basketballer Steven Adams in the groin. Adams and his Oklahoma City Thunder beat the Golden State 133-105 in Game 3 of the NBA Western Conference Final to go 2-1 up in the best-of-7 series. But the game was overshadowed by the incident, which saw Green called for a flagrant foul on Adams, although he wasn't ejected from the game.
Honestly, I didn't know I hit him. I walked to the three-point line, and when I turned around, he's on the floor. I don't know how anyone could possibly say, I did that on purpose.
Steven Adams, though, is unconvinced.
Happened before, mate. He's pretty accurate, that guy.
Game 4 in the series is on Wednesday. The Southern Steel can further consolidate their place at the top of the New Zealand Trans-Tasman Netball Conference when they play regular competition strugglers the Central Pulse in Wellington tonight. The Steel have won all but one of their 6 games, while the Pulse sit at the bottom of the table with just a draw and a win. The Manawatu golfer Tim Wilkinson has finished tied for 4th at the Byron Nelson Classic in Texas. Wilkinson finished 2 shots behind Sergio Garcia, who won in a playoff. Fellow New Zealander Danny Lee tied for 18th. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, botanist Beck Stanley talks about green roofs with gardens on top. Just be sure they can carry the extra weight, lest your potatoes end up in the middle of your lounge. Part 2 of our window on the world of bilingualism looks at how a second language can stave off dementia. And composer Joseph Bertolozzi turns the Eiffel Tower into a musical instrument. That's Nights with me, Brian Crump, afternoon news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Showers, some heavy and possibly thundery in the west, clearing tomorrow morning. Heavy rain developing tomorrow afternoon or evening with possible thunderstorms. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine, a brief period of rain tomorrow evening. Whanganui to Wellington, also Waidauppa, Nelson and Marlborough. Showers north of Levin becoming widespread this evening with some heavy falls possible. Becoming fine tomorrow tomorrow morning, then heavy rain with possible thunderstorms developing from late tomorrow afternoon. Westland showers, some heavy, clearing this evening, mostly fine tomorrow, but rain north of Hokitika later. Canterbury, outbreaks of rain, clearing tomorrow morning. Otago, Southland and Fiordland lakes, showers with sleet or snow above 700 metres, clearing tomorrow morning, fine about the fjords. And for the Chatham Islands, periods of rain. It is almost 6:09.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Let's return now to our reporter, Peter Newport, who's in Roxburgh, Central Otago, of course, where the relatives of the 38 people who were caught up in the snowstorm are waiting for their family members to come out. The people, including at least 2 children, were in a convoy, as we know, of four-wheel drives on a remote off-road track on Waikawa Bush Road. When they were caught up in a snowstorm yesterday afternoon, the group was forced to spend the night in their cars until rescuers were able to reach them this afternoon. Peter Newport is at the Roxburgh Golf Club. You there, Peter?
I am, John. It's pitch black here now. Time is marching on. The temperatures have plummeted. There's a lot of activity, a lot of volunteer fire brigade people here ready to receive the survivors or evacuees, as they're being referred to by the emergency services. But certainly the relatives have had a very anxious day.
Yeah, I bet they have. Still no sign of them. Boy, they're slow coming down, aren't they?
Yes, and it's been quite an operation. I think it's tempting for us down here to think, either they just get picked up by a helicopter or just got put on a snowcat. But of course, up there, the snow is between 1.5 and 3 metres deep. So that they're working almost in avalanche conditions and having to extract what we now know as 38 people, including children. And it's a very delicate operation. And what's been set up down here now is a very elaborate reception procedure so that they get looked after from a medical point of view, from a psychological point of view. There's a lot of paperwork, and only then do they get released to the waiting families and relatives here in the golf club building.
Okay, yeah, and it really is a nasty little rutted track, which might be fine in the dry, hard Central Otago summer, but under that kind of snow, that's difficult to traverse, isn't it?
It is, and I think I heard you earlier in the program, John, refer to it as being hardly a road at all, and that's exactly right. In fact, there's quite a few locals here, and one of them actually knows the man who drove this track through in the first place 80 years ago.
Wow.
And he swears that it has not been maintained at all since then. So, I mean, that gives us a very graphic illustration.
Yeah.
As you say, it's not a road, it's a paper road. It's just a road in name only. And that's what these four-wheel drive enthusiasts were looking for. They were looking for it to be as rough and as difficult as possible.
Thanks, Peter. We will go back to you if they turn up while we're still on air. And obviously, Radio New Zealand News will be updating this on the hour throughout the night. Keith Hay sent us in an email reminding us, of course, that there is real history in this area. In 1863, there was a real disaster in exactly this region. About 30 gold miners perished on the Old Man Range. About 500 were snowed in at Campbell's Creek in mid-August that year. Some got out to Waikawa, but others tried to cross the range to the Roxburgh side in blizzard conditions. The exact number who died is not known, but the mining warden estimated 30 perished in August. Incredible. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of the world, but in summer and in winter, the weather doesn't mess around there. A great email came in from Marty. I'm going to read it out. People, including kids, stuck overnight in cars, full-scale rescue. People, including kids, living in cars, stiff cheese, maybe winds will help, which signals a subject change. Last week on Checkpoint, we looked at homelessness at great length. We thought we'd seen and heard something approaching the worst of what the housing crisis has to offer. Families sleeping in cars, families in garages, overcrowding in homes without insulation, and emergency housing costing people up to $195 a night. Quite a lot of money, and it wasn't flash. That's money they borrow from WINZ, money they have little or no hope of repaying. Today we were told about a family whose emergency housing debt to WINZ is somewhere in the region of $60,000 now. We were told that during a phone call that began to Twain Murray, the homeless mother we met in a emergency housing in Takamini last week. She was at WINZ today to get another week of funding for that emergency housing, a small and very basic motel unit being charged out at $1,100 a week. She's in there with her husband and her 12-year-old son, who's permanently in a wheelchair. They were on Checkpoint. I asked Twain what she'd done at WINZ.
Well, I've just walked out of there and they've
paid for an extended stay of a week at the motor lodge that I'm staying at in Takanini, and they paid, I think it's $1,155 for me to stay, me and my family to stay there for an extra 7 days. Also, we've talked about accommodation. We've talked about the grant, actioning a non-recoverable grant, which is, I don't know how to say it, Lucy.
Tawani, I'll talk to Alistair about that because I know he's with you, the advocacy coordinator from the AAAP. But so you've got one more week at $1,155, money advanced by WINZ that you're going to have to repay them, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And what happens at the end of that week?
At the end of that week, I'll be doing the same thing the next week and trying for another extension, which I will probably get, but have to pay that back as well.
So, Tawani, you are homeless. You have little or no money, but at the moment you are borrowing $1,155 a week from WINZ, which you told us last week you have absolutely no hope of repaying, to live in what I would describe, having visited it, as really crappy accommodation in Takanini.
Yes, that's correct. It's very correct. It is.
And there's nothing else you can do.
There's nothing else I can do but wait and see where we go weekly, day to day, really weekly.
Week to week. So you never know more than 7 days in advance of where you're going to be.
No, I never know more than 7 days of where I am.
And you have a son in a wheelchair.
Yes, I do, yes.
And have you said to Housing New Zealand, can I please have somewhere permanent? Are you having this discussion with people?
I've had this discussion with them a few times, yes. They've seen my circumstances. They've come to where I have actually lived. Still to no avail. I'm still living weekly as it is now.
In emergency housing at $1,155 a week?
Mm-hmm.
Money you have to borrow from WINZ?
Yes. And pay back.
What's it like in that place in Takanini that I visited last week to see you at?
Well, it's adequate for us now because we are homeless, but really it's not. My son can't move. We all can't move. We're feeling a bit claustrophobic. It's getting stressful. We're starting to nag at each other because we're in such a confined area. I really feel for my son because he can't even access the bathroom properly. His chair's scraping the door because he can't sit, but we have to get him in there because he can't walk. He can't even shower properly because he can't sit in the cubicle properly, so he has to sit and shower with his legs out. It's really inadequate for us, and it is really getting stressful, like daily.
Tawani, you're there with Alistair Russell from the AAAP, right? Advocacy Coordinator. Can you pass the phone over to him for me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, John.
Hi, Alistair. Nice to talk to you. So you've taken Tawani to WINZ, right?
That's correct, yep.
And so she is at the moment receiving emergency housing at the cost of $1,155 a week that she's having to borrow from WINZ and repay. What discussions did you have with WINZ on her behalf today?
Today I tried to point out to them that there's a clear capacity for them to give this money on a non-recoverable basis so that she wouldn't have to pay it back. And the criteria for that are essentially that it is an essential need and that to not make the payment would cause serious hardship. I spoke to the manager there and he agreed that this advance payment is causing serious financial hardship and also that an essential need exists. And despite that, he then incorrectly told me that a legislative change would be needed. The law would need to change for them to make this payment. And that is simply bizarre and utterly wrong.
So just to clarify, Tawani is going to have to repay this money?
At this stage, Tawani is going to repay this money. We have lodged a review of this decision today. We've lodged another 6 reviews on behalf of others in very similar situations today and on Friday. And like I say, there is the clear capacity for work and income to make this a payment so that it doesn't cause financial hardship. But at this stage, there is no will to do so, and I think that the Minister needs to make a call on this and actually direct her staff to do the right thing.
So, Alistair, Tuani is now accumulating debt at the rate of $1,155 a week, but the reason she's homeless is that she doesn't have any money. So what hopes does she have of repaying this debt to WINZ?
It's a ridiculous situation. Work and income will be waiting a very long time for her to repay this, if it is ever repaid at all. And in the meantime, it hangs over her. It restricts her ability to access further assistance from work and income into the future. And the only thing they did today was give her an accommodation supplement of $165 and another temporary payment of $112, so that rather than paying $11.55 a week, she's now clocking it up at $880 a week. And that's nowhere near adequate. It's an inadequate response where another option is clearly available.
Alistair, do you know how much money Tuani owes now?
Well, she's now been there since her third week. She's clocked up $2,200 in the first 2 weeks, so that's now $3,300 in 3 weeks that she's clocking it up, and that will be on an ongoing basis. Like I say, I'm aware of another situation where a woman has clocked up over $60,000 of debt because of her family situation.
Wait a sec, Alistair, can you be absolutely explicit and unequivocal with me? You have heard of a situation where someone has clocked up $60,000 of debt to WINZ for emergency housing?
That's correct.
And you're absolutely certain about that?
I have no doubt of that.
$60,000. So what chance does that person have of repaying it?
Hell will freeze over before that's paid.
And what sort of weekly sum are those people paying for this emergency housing?
In excess of $1,000 a week, around the $1,300 a week mark.
Which, Alistair, would actually get you quite a nice place in Ponsonby, wouldn't it? I mean, these are...
You'd be living in Mission Bay on this money, yeah.
And yet these are the emergency houses that WINZ are approving?
Yeah.
So why is that person still in emergency housing if they've clocked up 60 grand worth of debt? Why aren't they in something permanent?
Because she, as a family with 8 children in Housing New Zealand, evicted the family because they found that the house was contaminated by meth, and the meth test does not show in any way who actually contaminated it. Housing New Zealand chose to evict on the basis that it was contaminated and knowingly put a woman with 8 children on the streets.
So wait a sec. So she's been evicted from the house by Housing New Zealand, and now WINZ is supplementing emergency accommodation for the same person in another property at the rate of more than $1,000 a week.
Yep. And Housing New Zealand has banned her for 12 months from seeking their assistance. So she'll clock up this debt for another 6 months and then go back to Housing New Zealand seeking assistance with a debt of probably in excess of $100,000.
That's Alistair Russell, who is an advocacy coordinator for AAAP, the Auckland Action Against Poverty group. They often work as advocates for people going in and seeking this kind of relief. We are trying to establish the situation here because that does seem quite extraordinary. And we will report back tomorrow once we've worked out what's going on. Wellington's Circa Theatre is celebrating 40 years of bringing great theatre to the capital, much of it showcasing homegrown New Zealand acting and playwriting talent. If you live in Wellington and you love the theatre, you will certainly have gone to Circa. Legendary actor Ray Henwood is a founding member. He's also currently playing King Lear as part of the 40th anniversary season. He'd be a great Lear, would Ray? Our reporter Elizabeth Brown spoke to him and asked how and why it all got started.
The group of us who formed the original, the founding members, if you like, the council, we really felt that Wellington could support a second professional theatre. So it was an idea that we could produce more work, that the the actors, the directors, designers, all would approve of another theatre, would the audience be ready for it? And that was the experiment. The result was excellent.
So what was the first play that Circa actually staged?
The first play we staged was Knuckle, which was a British thriller of the time. We then followed that with an Irish play, then an American play, and then the fourth play was by a new playwright who I'd met in Wellington and said he was writing a play, would we be interested? We certainly were, and it was Roger Hall and Glide Time, which was a bit of a phenomenon in professional theatre, as it has proved right across New Zealand. From the opening night, we were full. It was amazing.
The theatre moved to its current location on the waterfront in 1994, and right. I hear there was a bit of drama with the seats that night.
Oh, it was amazing, because during the years at the Old Theatre, we used to meet every Monday night, the council, and slowly map the year out for plays, etc. And then when the deadline had come, we had to move. My wife was then a lawyer, and she said something that actors would never say, and that is, we'll build a building. And sure enough, we put our mind to it. She was a great force in getting sponsorship, getting the business people of the city interested, and we raised the money and we built the theatre. So now comes opening night, and we have a new block of seats to go in. And by some strange quirk of fate, the final batch of seats hadn't arrived by the time that the guests had arrived for a champagne launch in the foyer, one of which was the then Governor-General, our First Lady Governor-General. And Caroline entertained her in the foyer and the guests by even more champagne, while in the theatre people were ferrying seats from the factory in Newtown to get them in on time. We started about an hour late. The audience didn't seem to mind.
So other theatres, like you said before, you were Downstage before, and Downstage hasn't survived. So why do you think Circa's managed to survive?
We set out to form what has been the first such venture in New Zealand, which is, it was called a cooperative of actors. It's really a shared business venture. And Caroline then, as a lawyer, said, well, look, if a group of lawyers can get together and put their shingle up and do their work, why can't actors do that? So we did that, and we relied very much only on what came in through the box office for the share that all the participants, the actors, director, backstage, all the people involved would take a share in it. And we pioneered that, which has worked to this day. The only addition has been, of course, that we decided we needed to get some sort of funding help for the rehearsal period, because while as professional actors we could do radio work in those days, there was quite a lot of radio work to be done, much less nowadays. Television was underway, some film work, so we could keep ourselves alive, certainly, but we needed that funding to allow it to be a fully professional rehearsal and performance period. So we set up the Theatre Artists Charitable Trust, which was ring-fenced. Money from the business community was ring-fenced only for each individual production. And that has survived to this day.
Circa Theatre, 40 years old. That's Ray Hen. We're talking to our reporter, Elizabeth Brown. Coming up on World Watch PM at 6:30, which is only 2.5 minutes away, with John Greaves. Australians wait to hear who will head their nation. They're going to decide it, of course, and the world's largest insurance company to get rid of its tobacco assets. This is a fascinating story. Lots and lots of feedbacks on the four-wheel drive, and most of it's not that complimentary. Hey, John, among the backpackers, among the backcountry tramping fraternity, these four-wheel off-road types are about the same value as jet skiers, says Jack. Adrian says, why is so much sympathy being afforded to these four-wheel drive clowns who ignored weather forecasts? What is the bill to the taxpayer? And Peter says, if the roads now closed, those four-wheel drives are frozen in for winter, good. So by and large, people are thinking, what the hell were they doing up there? Let's go to Peter Newport, who's been covering this all day. I heard you first thing on Morning Report, Peter. You've been filing for RNZ News all day, and you are now waiting with the time at 28.5 minutes past 6 for them to arrive down off Waikawa Road back to Roxburgh. Is that the case?
That's the case, John. As you say, everybody is starting to wonder just what you said. Why were they up there? But the immediate feeling here is one of relief that they're all safe. It's now night. We have freezing rain falling. It's lit up like a sort of Ridley Scott science fiction movie. We've got firemen almost waiting one-on-one. There's going to be 60 people arriving here in the next few minutes. Not only the survivors, but all the volunteers who rescued them have to be medically checked and fed. So the drama isn't over, and I think we might be here for quite some time.
Yeah, look, we've got about 50 seconds before we have to go, but Peter, real relief that they don't have to spend a second night out there. I mean, you talked about it being -5 last night. They would have been running out of fuel. It's good they're back, isn't it?
What a good story, John, in the sense that they've survived.
Yeah.
But there have to be lessons here. I mean, these mountains look so tame when the weather's nice, but when they change, I mean, it really can often be fatal. And I think, the outcome here is one of great good fortune.
Peter Newport, RNZ's Queenstown-based reporter, who's over in Roxburgh in Central, ending our program for tonight. We have confirmation from the police they are now on their way down the main road, and they will be back in Roxburgh shortly. Whatever you think of why they were there and how they got there, it's good news they're out. See you tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The police say 38 people due to arrive in Roxburgh after spending a night stranded in snow in the central Otago high country seem to be fit and well. The group, which includes 2 children, were trapped in 13 off-road vehicles along the Waikaia Bush Road last night. A fire that swept through a school dormitory in northern Thailand has killed at least 17 girls while they were sleeping. Jetstar has been fined $12,000 for allowing a deported passenger to fly back to New Zealand. Secondary school principals say a court case will test whether they can punish international students who break the law outside school time. And health officials are reporting a 5th confirmed case of measles in Northland. Our next news and weather is at 7.